These statutes now at the moment, right? And there's still a few to go through before I move on to the next project, which I think I'm probably I might read that Smoke and Mirrors book, but I haven't been feeling like reading it, and I've had it ages now. I actually had 5 copies. I guess I really need to read that book because it's got quite a lot of the legislation in it. Well, it doesn't have the Tumultuous Petitioning Act in there, but there's probably of what I've read now, and of what I have been learning. I'm probably gonna know a lot more about the surrounding circumstances of the whole framework. I think actually I'm glad that I've learned what I've learned, because I think if I'd have read that Smoke and Mirrors book, he's just got loads and loads of acts and statute in there, and I don't think that he's laid it out in the way that I've just been going about learning things now. And I kind of feel like that I've kind of found myself a little, by drawing like the timeline of the courts and learning about the juries and learning about all of the other things to do with like the older process of law. So I think it will probably be good for me to read that soon. But for now, I'm just going to go through these. So because I want to get these out of the way, because I've got a few screenshots of relevant things. So I just want to try and get all these catalogued and get them uploaded. So these are the little ones that I did from the other day. Right? So these ones. There's a little funny one in here. There's a really odd law. A very, very strange law. It's actually about a person and an individual. And it's very, very odd. And it's actually a joke. It's actually like being put in the legislation or put in the law for a joke against an actual member of parliament or individual who was a knight of the realm. And then I researched it and I found that it's actually correct. John Coventry. There's a whole story about John Coventry, how he ends up in the statute law, but we'll get onto that in a minute. I'm starting to wonder if there was something to do with John Lennon, a joke. I think there could be a parliamentary or a state joke in there as well in more modern times. But anyway, I just want to go through these because actually these are important to the investigation and to my study. So I'll go through these. So this first one here, right? Officers not making you cry after felons for favour shall have 1 year's imprisonment. And the notorious felons who will not put themselves on the inquest shall have strong and hard imprisonment. I don't know what the inquest is. Notorious felons who will not put themselves on the inquest. Well, I think notorious means like well known, doesn't it? Notorious means well known. Well known criminals who will not put themselves on the inquest. Why wouldn't they put themselves on the inquest though? Maybe if they were famous or well known, maybe they got kind of some favour of certain peers. You know, like maybe they were like kind of Robin Hood. You know, like Robin Hood. You know, like Robin Hood and his merry men, and Robin Hood and Little John. Maybe it was like that. Maybe it was like, because it's kind of like if the 100 or their peers kind of like supported them or were on their side, then maybe they can't get done by their peers. The peers won't turn them in. Oh, that's like the Sheriff of Nottingham, isn't it? Because the Sheriff of Nottingham was after Robin Hood. But in the film with Kevin Costner, they go, yes, the people love him, like that. That's this is that notorious felons who will not put themselves on the inquest shall have strong and hard punishment. I wonder if that is to do with it. But the only thing is, my other phone's charging up now, and I want to research these words. Hold on a minute. So for notorious, it just says publicly known, manifest to the world, evident, usually known to a disadvantage, hence most always used in the ill sense, notorious thief or notorious criminal, or notorious for gaming. Or it can mean in a good sense, your goodness since you provoked me shall be most notorious. So it says that the inquest basically is the trial, or the judicial process with the sheriff and the peers and whatever, basically like in William Penn. So it says of notorious felons who will not put themselves on the inquest. Well, why wouldn't they put themselves on the inquest? Will not put themselves on the inquest. So strong and hard imprisonment. If they're well known, though, what about the witnesses? Maybe confess. I don't know. What happens if no one? What happens if people kind of like? I think the thing with the jury is like it's official proceeding with judgment. But if everyone knows that they're criminals, it's not lawful due process, is it? If they just decide they're not going to do anything. I guess if they've got the support of their peers, or even if they've got opposition to them. Well, if they've got opposition, depends whether they've got witnesses. If they've got they can't be prosecuted without two witnesses. So if they've got more than two witnesses and it's notorious, then why wouldn't they be on the inquest? Unless it's so that's something to do with the peers, isn't it? It definitely has got something to do with the peers. I mean, the first example I thought of was Robin Hood. When they say the people love him, but the sheriff's after him. It seems like that kind of scenario to me. If I'm wrong on that, fair enough. But the first part, the other part, officers not making hue and cry after felons for favour shall have 1 year imprisonment. So that means favour. That means basically if getting bought off, or if criminals are getting paying off the sheriff, or giving him some of their things that they've stolen, their bounty, or even doing him a favour or whatever. Now this is interesting, very, very interesting that I found this, because this is a very, very, very it's an Edward the First Act, this as well. William 3 Edward 1 Chapter 9 Volume 1. All right. So is that William and Mary? That might be William and Mary as well. But also Edward the First. So this is really, 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 really important to BentCup.biz investigation, because this is like when I said that, I said that the north of England, that blackmail, that the word blackmail originates from the south of Scotland and the north of England. And it's also tied into the whole when they've got like a sheriff, like a military leader, like a general or a military leader who has a judicial appointment authority. And if he captures an enemy or an opponent, and he basically makes judgment on them without a fair trial, that's illegal. And then there's also the slight variation of that, whereas they're not allowed to, in the claim of right, in the Scottish claim of right, they're not allowed to get people to confessions out of people for favours, right? or reduced or promise of reduced punishments for confessions and so forth. So this has got favour in it as well. But it says officers, so does that mean everyone, not just the sheriff, the constable, the mayor, the alderman, all of them, and possibly the jurors even as well? Officers not making hue and cry after felons for favour shall have 1 year's imprisonment. Maybe it means the villagers as well. Maybe it means everyone, because maybe like when they said they call suit, once it's been reported, once they've reported the offence, and if they've got the witnesses, and they have to go, everyone has to go after them. Maybe like at that point when they've got suit, that means the 100 itself has got a suit. So the whole 100 has got to go after the criminals. So they're then, it's called that the 100 is taking a suit against the offender, right? So you could say they're all officers, because officers wear a shirt and tie. I know, like, this is a bit. It says officers, so I mean, it's like if everyone is in suits, that's what they say, suit, right? They're all acting under hue and cry. It didn't have a proper police force, but whether it's the trained bands or the sheriff or the constable or the people of the hundreds, right, they're going suits. So maybe they're all therefore acting as officers. Maybe they're all acting as officers, like us, basically. If we're using the Criminal Law Act 1967 and pursuing, citizen's arrest, really, if you're doing a citizen's arrest, maybe you've taken office or official. Official. I'll just put office. A particular duty. Office, right? This is in the 1800s dictionary. A particular duty, charge, or trust conferred by public authority and for a public purpose, an employment undertaken by commission or authority from government or those who administer it. Thus we speak in the office of Secretary of State, of the Treasury, of a judge, of a sheriff, of a justice of the peace, etc. Offices are civil, judicial, ministerial, executive, legislative, political, municipal, diplomatic, military, ecclesiastical, etc. A duty, charge of trust of a sacred nature or conferred by God himself is in the office of priest. In the Old Testament. So business. So it's not just in business. An act of good or ill voluntary tendered, usually in an act of worship. It's quite a lot. There's quite a lot actually under office here. So yeah, official, office. It's officially. Someone officially, when they're taking suit, then. Someone who is, I wanted to get, someone who is officially going after someone, then making hue and cry after felons for favours shall have 1 year's imprisonment. So if they don't go after them. Now this is the thing. Been going on for quite a while now, but so the thing is, hue and cry is when something has been reported. So with BenCop.biz, with the illegal speed cameras and all that thing, right? Well, a lot of those cameras are like set up as traps. No one's reported a crime or anything, but the police just like to set them up to get people, There's a thing saying, I got some evidence from some of this law the other day, that, sheriffs only have to go for crime that they're warranted to get or that people have reported for them to go after. But nowadays, they don't just go for crimes that people are reporting in that they want them to go for. They do their own little investigations, their own stings. They they find their own, criminals. But usually this is the thing. Instead of like, I've had my car stolen or this or that, or someone's attacked me, if all the police resources were going into that, then, they might get solved. But instead, this is what people, are getting fined, parking tickets, all these things. But then again, maybe the government are complaining that the police need funds. So, if they don't have funds, then they can't have equipment. But then again, what they're doing is they set all these things up to get us that it's not really things they've been warranted for or reported in, but they just use it for a cash grab so then they can get more funding in and going after catching people. That's what I don't like about it. And they broke the law because, the way they're going about it, they're getting people to confess without a fair trial for favour of a reduced fine. Now, the thing is, firstly, most of the speed cameras offences aren't hue and cry, which means that no one's complained about them. They're just sat there waiting for someone to come along and make a crime. It's not a crime that's actually been called in, right? The police guys just sat there at the side of the road with a camera waiting for someone to come past, right? And the thing is that also, not making you and cry after felon's favour shall. The thing is, right? If the police chief, right, if you commit an offence, right, then shouldn't Magna Carta leave you in due process to be put on trial, right? But what's happening is the police chief's actually, pay £80 or £60 or £80 or whatever, £100, right? And they don't take it any further. They give you the points automatically, but you don't have to go to court for favour. I think the favour. I think there is a favour. I think that we're doing the favour by giving the fine over and just giving him an easy job. Oh, sick. Oh yeah, I did it. You say you did it, and you actually don't go to court and have a trial. It's like these fixed penalties they've conjured up. These fixed penalty things. Right? But then what happens is they treat it as, not that serious. But the thing is, then when you've done it 3 times, then suddenly you have to go to court, but then you lose your driving licence, which is very serious, but for something that before they didn't think was serious. But they use this principle of, you repeat offender. But the thing is, you could be a repeat offender with a parking ticket, but you only always get the same fine every time, right? That's the problem with it. And when you lose your driving license, the thing is, if you defend it first time and go in, you might win, and then you might not get any punishment at all whatsoever. It's quite diabolical in a way because they do these they treat it as very, very minor, and then there's speed courses and all this thing, and I think it's getting people together, and it's almost like the schooling the jury in a way, which is kind of like trying to change the political opinion. But I did a video on that the other day, how they're setting it up and doing it. It's like indoctrinating. Instead of having a jury, which is random, they're kind of like almost like getting a lot of people together and then getting all these courses everywhere. It's almost like they're trying to put a political or judicial opinion in as a judge. It's almost like these speed awareness courses that they're judging people. It's almost kind of like they're trying to get the peers together in a group and get them to kind of go along with it and admit that this is wrong, or admit they're guilty and change their conscience. through these kind of indoctrination sessions with, like, he's not even a police, well, these speed awareness course people, some of them are police, some of them aren't, and in a way, it's not a proper legal process. It's almost corrupting the process, because the people are they're meant to be the voters, the people who decide, what is meant to be right and wrong, on what the law should and should not be. The police don't make the laws up. The police are there to enforce the law, not tell us what the law should or shouldn't be, or what we should or shouldn't do. So this officer's not making you cry after felons for favour. Really? They're not, though, are they? Because if you say you're guilty, right, for a favour, he's got evidence on you, right? And then he puts these points on your licence, but you never actually went on trial, and you never actually had a judgment. What he's doing is he's getting a lot of easy evidence, and he's getting all your details. He's not really having to do much, except, just set a camera there and wait for someone to come past. And then he's just getting people admitting they're guilty, like massive piles and piles and piles, right? Because of the money they're paying off. And there is no justice, really, because, justice is getting all the facts and evidence for a proper lawful due process, and getting people to explain what happened, and someone to hear that and get questions over it, and challenge your prosecutor in defence, and then a jury listen to it and then decide what they think, right? Not like you doing something, then a sheriff going, you did this and I want some money off you, or I'm going to prosecute you. Well, he's caught you, right? He isn't making after you, really. He isn't going after you because he's got some on you, but he doesn't go through with it, does he? He only goes through. He pursues for a fine from you, money, to extort money from you, right? That's not justice. It's not a lawful process, really. What it is, it's a guy, a chief guy, getting some information on you and basically saying, right, give some money, or threatening with you with justice. He's threatening you. He's threatening that you will face justice if you don't pay money. I think, he's actually threatening you that you will face justice if you don't give money over, right? But the thing is, with the speed camera system, which is all over the country, remember, it's not hue and cry. Because hue and cry is someone's reported it. But with this, the police are sat there, and he's kind of like, maybe he's calling it when you drive past, crime, crime, crime. Like he's sat there calling it himself. Really. I mean, is a laser beam, the hue and cry, the laser beam. A lot of people don't even know that they're committing an offence or a crime, and particularly if he's changing the road signage around and misleading people. So, there's like a national speed limit sign, coming off a roundabout when it's 50, but it makes you look like it's national speed limit and misleads you. Someone's like, you didn't see that, did you? Like hue and cry, I didn't see that, did you? Well, it's like a trick, innit? So this is anyone. So people who take favors, people who take favors for not pursuing crime, but also they're not allowed to get confessions. So, you know, right. So going to the next one. Lords shall not imprison offenders at their own wills for trespassers in their parks. So I guess this is like judgment of the peers. So what that's saying is basically that the Lords have got a jurisdiction in Parliament. They're not allowed to just give judgment from a higher authority against people without them having a fair trial or a judgment of their peers. Or it might not even just mean peers. It might not even matter whether it's like a judgment of the peers in the 100, but at least a fair trial. Now, this is funny because I've always wondered this. I've always wondered, you know, as you're going about your life, if you ever did anything wrong or even something necessarily, what happens if the king, you know, the monarch didn't like it or the queen didn't like it. I've always wondered, you know, do they exercise a judicial authority from the lords, you know, through the nooks and crannies, and giving strange or odd punishments? For example, you know, if your favourite, you know, building disappears, or, you know, just when you meet a new girlfriend, you get done by speed camera and lose your driving licence, and, you know, you don't get to go anywhere with them. All these misfortunes, you know, the misfortunes, it makes me wonder if there's someone exercising their own judgment. I think strange and odd punishments were made illegal, but that doesn't necessarily to say that people don't administer them if you don't know. The thing is, you know, how do you know who's doing what? I mean, when some of these people own a hell of a lot of assets, buildings, companies, businesses, and, you know, if you ever do anything that's not to their taste or liking, how do you know that, you know, they just don't arrange it for, you know, the property next to you to be bought, and then the next thing you walk out and, you know, it's gone, or, you know, someone really, you know, some horrible neighbours move in, or God knows what. I mean, I get on with, well, I liked all our neighbours, to be honest, but some of them moved away. You know, or even someone like Boris Johnson's dad's neighbour, you know, that guy, that incident there, you know, that those weird, threatening kind of like scares all the Conservatives, you know, when Boris Johnson's dad's next door neighbour, you know, ends up having that strange incident. You know, Johnson ended up, you know, in hospital, didn't he? All these kind of like incidents, you know, it makes you wonder. So, but apparently, so lords shall not imprison offenders at their own wills for trespass in their parks. At their own wills, so it's got to be through a lawful due process with a judge. So I thought that was just a little bit that was worth noting there. I mean, some of these aren't necessarily that relevant to the Bill of Rights, but it shows us to be a lawful due process, you know. I guess you've got to have a writ and an accusation, haven't you? And someone's got to hear the evidence rather than them just, you know, imprison them. That's a little bit, you see, that's very, very similar to, you know, those generals of the armies who've got judicial authority, you know, and they capture their opponents and then they just, you know, prosecute them without a fair trial. It's a little bit like that, I suppose. That's in the claim of right. In Parliament, ought not to be questioned in any court. All right, I think this is... Parliament ought to be questioned in any court out of Parliament, and for preserving the laws Parliament ought to be held frequently. The King's absence from England not to dissolve the Parliament. So I think this is from William and Mary. So that's from the Bill of Rights, William and Mary there, W and M. So this is matters in Parliament ought not to be questioned in any court, etc. out of Parliament. So that's like Lord Hanningfield, right? Ought not to be questioned by any court out of Parliament, and for preserving the laws, etc. So that's what that's exactly there. That this here in the middle, under that 422, that is effectively what Jeremy Johnson KC used in Lord Hanningfield's case. That matters in Parliament ought to be questioned by any court, and for preserving the laws. So that's kind of like, effectively they were kind of tossing up, is Lord Hanningfield's expenses, affairs, matters of Parliament, or does it fall under a misdemeanour which he can be prosecuted with? But the question is Lord Hanningfield's financial affairs something that is usually put through Parliament or the House of Lords? I guess they make up their own wages and so forth and their own money, but if it's an offence, though, it says misdemeanours can be prosecuted in the courts. I think with Hanningfield, I've done a whole video on that recently. I've done multiple ones on it. I think with that Lord Hanningfield's case, it's not what you do, it's the way that you do it. It's like, it's not what you do, it's the way that you do it. I think the way that they did it was the problem. I don't think that it's necessarily what he did, but the way they went about it, if they were going to exercise some action, why didn't they do it when it was reported in? Why did they wait until he'd ended up in the court? And they also made it look like he can't be prosecuted in the courts. The way they did it was kind of like to make it out. I think the way that they did it was kind of like to try to make out that they can call it when they want, or even they decided that they've got exclusive cognizance now, for everything. But it apparently not, apparently not. Apparently you can prosecute them in the courts if it's for various offences that aren't necessarily, in the line of duty, so to say. So going to the next one now. Candidates after the... Don't even know what that says. Test. Candidates after the test of the writ or after such place becomes vacant, giving or promising any reward to any persons having a vote. Or after such place becomes vacant, giving or promising any reward to any person having a vote. And for being elected, declared incapable to serve in Parliament. Wow, that's that. So I've actually got a paper, or I had loads of sheets from a book. It's actually from that. It's from the Corrupt and Illegal Practices Prevention book, which is a really good book. It's some pages from there that show all lots of offences, like treating to drinks, or things like that, where if a candidate is doing favours, and if people will vote for them, then it apparently you're not allowed to do it. It says here that they're declared incapable to serve in Parliament. So if they're doing favours for votes, that's it. They're disqualified from running. You know, I actually think there's been some of that going on at the moment in this London mayor election. We're allowed to donate things to them. I think we can donate to them, but it has to be through. When you donate to them, it has to be officially tallied and taken in, and so forth. And also, you know, people are just getting things printed up or made up to help. And how do you claim that money back? Because it has to. It's a certain classification of material, and you know, firstly, it's non-profit. You're not supposed to be taxed on it, and you know, all material that is for elections is meant to be paid for by Parliament or claimed back. So if people are just getting it made, right? They, you know, who claims the money? How do you claim your money back for it? Because you're not meant to pay for it, right? So that means like you're kind of like it's you're paying for something that isn't supposed to be paid for. It, you know, this is why really it needs to be. You should make donations of money officially to the campaign, and then they will, you know, allocate it, and then, you know, whatever through the officially, and then they can claim it all back. You know, I think something like that, but you know, maybe I'm wrong. You know, if I'm wrong, fair enough. And false returns of members prohibited, and any return country. What was this one? All statutes in Jeffels extend. After verdict, no judgment shall be stayed on any distinct form of substance of it. All statutes. Or imprisonment, impeachment. No part. All right. Imprisonment. No free man shall be taken in prison but for lawful judgment of his peers. That's Magna Carta. No man shall be imprisoned upon the appeal of a woman for the death of any other than her husband. After session recovered. After session. Lord shall not imprison offenders by their own wills. Beliefs ought to have account to those officers not making you inquiry films. Actually done all those separate. No legislative power in either or both houses of Parliament without the King. I think the Parliament. There's another one that said Parliament can run while the King's abroad, though. And all orders or ordinances of both of either houses for raising taxes, arms without royal assent are void, and saying that the Parliament is being shall election of members of Parliament ought to be free. The freedom of speech, debates and proceedings, that's from the Bill of Rights. Officers of excise not to meddle in elections of Parliament. That's like Chimhara. King's absence from England not to dissolve the Parliament. This Parliament not ought to be adjourned or dissolved, but by Act of Parliament. Parliament does. The royal assent to this act not to determine this session. The royal assent to this bill shall not determine this session. No legislative power in either or both houses of Parliament without the King. Shall extend to deprive members of either house of ancient privilege. Says the stain of both of your houses of tax. This shall not extend to deprive members of either house of ancient privilege of debating at committees and or alteration of laws redressing grievances of either house of ancient privilege of debating at committees, etc., or alterations of laws and addressing grievances. I think that kind of sets out what Parliament is meant to be there for, though, doesn't it? No legislative power in either or both houses of Parliament without the King. All orders and ordinances of both or either houses for raising taxes, arms, that royal assent avoid, and the stain of Parliament, they shall not extend to deprive the members of either house of ancient privilege. The privilege is debating at committees, etc., or of alteration of laws, redressing grievances. Well, that's the grievances of people who have made them, you know. The thing is, you know, the thing is that if Hanningfield hasn't paid his, if Hanningfield's filled his expenses, isn't that a grievance that someone would bring though? That's a grievance, isn't it? Like, oh, we've got a grievance. Hanningfield hasn't paid his money, so can we, get that sorted out? That's the thing, though, isn't it? Like, it's a grievance. That's why you go to the court to report him for a crime. But whereabouts does it get sorted out? It is another thing. It's definitely not the raising of taxes or for the country. It's running for the country. The thing is, Parliament's meant to be things for the nation or things for the country. Now, true that they get wages and get paid and stuff like that, but usually they don't, the thing is, right, the problem with this is this, right? Say, I get paid, right? I get money. Everyone, you and me, right? We all get paid money, and Parliament decide, what that money should be, like minimum wage, right? Minimum wage, right? This is probably quite a good one. This actually. So, if Parliament decide what the minimum wage is, right, and matters to do with monies and payment, isn't that a matter of Parliament? So, if I got prosecuted in the courts, to do with money, right? Well, couldn't I say, what my wages is a matter of Parliament? They decide what the monies are, right? So I could just say, like Lord Hanningfield, like you're talking, whatever it is, sick pay, right? Sick pay. Well, how much sick pay is it? Well, it's not a matter for Parliament to set the sick. My sick pay is a matter for Parliament. If I, this is it. It's set by government. you have revenue and the different departments, but this is the thing in the committees in Parliament. It's government, isn't it? You know, Parliament sends petitions to committees or to different departments of government. So I mean, you might as well say, oh, you know, it's Jim Harrow. You know, if you petition the government, right, for changes in the processes of revenue, right? So we'll look at about petitions. They don't have a proper process set up for people doing petitions to the House of Commons to claim money or tax off. I mean, the Petitions Committee should have a proper form that people can fill in, but they don't. It's not really accounted for in that Tax 126. So, I mean, you could complain about that. You know, if you petition Parliament for such a procedure or form, maybe they might pass it to Revenue to deal with, or we'll pass this to Revenue to deal with, right? So we'll say, well, yeah, I'll petition Parliament for it. Well, you will pass it to Revenue. We say, well, okay then. So if I haven't done my tax properly for claiming it, well, are you going to get prosecuted? Are you going to get prosecuted in Parliament or in a court? It's like Hanningfield, isn't it? We could use the same argument as Hanningfield. Say, oh, well, if you say, oh, you're my expenses, well, so my expenses for the petition are dealt with by Parliament. But the problem is, Parliament don't want to deal with it. You know what the thing with this Hanningfield thing is this, right? The problem with this Hanningfield thing is this. I'm complaining about the Petitions Committee like they're not giving like enforcement for like advertisements or sharing of petitions. They're not giving any subpoenas or anything like that. They're not really helping with anything. Yet they're meant to do, right? So it is meant to be Parliament. It is meant to be Parliament that do it, but they're not. They're not doing anything. And that's the thing, They're saying, oh, it's not for Parliament to... When you get prosecuted, when you've got the right to petition, right, because you're doing a petition to Parliament, they're the other party, and you exercise a rights claim and overriding objectives, Parliament aren't helping. They're not helping at all. Like even with Extinction Rebellion, and they said I'll deal with it in the courts, right? But these are petitions to Parliament. So why are they going with Lord Hanningfield? It's House of Lords business. This, it really Hanningfield. It is, it's questionable why all these campaign groups like Just Stop Oil and so forth are getting dealt with in the courts, but not Hanningfield. That's the question. No committees for AIDS, petitions to Parliament not to be presented with excessive number of... So this is... I don't know why this wasn't in the section under petitions. So that's your 1661 Tumultuous Petitioning Act. Just hearing a little tiny paragraph in another statute book. Petitions to Parliament, etc., not to be presented with excessive number of people, not exceeding a number of 10 persons, not to extend to any addresses to the King by any of the members of or either above Houses of Parliament. Both not every House of Parliament cannot or not ought to pretend to command the military. I don't know who does then. Militia. We'd like to know who's commanding the militia. Isn't Grant Shapps, is it by any chance? Who is commanding it? Both not either of the Houses of Parliament cannot not ought to pretend to command the military. Who does then? I thought they did. Tony Blair sending them to war. Is it actually meant to be the King? Who does control the military then? What's the point in having defence committee or a defence secretary. The only thing about this 1661 Tumultuous Act part here is it's not got the putting their hands to the petition. No commissions for aids, voluntary presents can be issued but by authority of Parliament. See, we have got the right. We have got the right to issue to write our own petitions. That's what they have got. Acts of Lords and Commons, 1660, not being a formal Parliament confirmed. The Bill of Attainder for the Earl of Strafford been obtained by Tulmuts. Undue practices repealed. Wow! Oh, they used an attainder for Stratford. For Strafford. They actually used an attainder. That's what they use on Strafford, an attainder. Strafford is one of the guys leading up to the Civil War. The bill attainder for Strafford being obtained by tumults, undue practices, etc. I think he died anyway. They executed him. Parliament shall not be intermitted above 3 years. No pardon of those who. Oh yeah, this is a really weird. This is like the really, really weird law. I found this. It's pertaining to an individual. No pardon. Is this for real? This I don't know if I can take this seriously or not, or if someone's just like put it in there or edited it in somehow. No pardon of those who cut the nose of Sir John Coventry, a member, but by Act of Parliament. County of Palatine, Durham, Knights, Fielders. Account of money. The Lords Commons convened 1680. The Lords and Commons convened 1688, declared to be the Parliament, notwithstanding want of summons or other defect of form. All acts to relate to the day of meeting. Oh right, declared the Parliament notwithstanding want of summons. Well, every time you really every time you submit a petition in, really, you're kind of wanting defect of form. I wonder if something a defect of form. It's like on whether it's eligible to even read. And all acts to relate to the day of meeting this Parliament may be dissolved into the unusual manners. This Parliament may be dissolved in the usual manner as if summoned by writ. So the petition summons itself, really, isn't it? Because you send it in and evidence is automatically compelled. I think the thing with the right to petition is that the right to petition itself kind of summons people to start, sending in evidence and complaints. Right, so this is that odd law what I just read out. No pardon those who cut the nose of Sir John Coventry, a member, but by Act of Parliament. So what's that all about? Is it even real? Well, it turns out it is. John Coventry. Sir John Coventry was a politician who sat in the Commons between 1667 and 1682. So 67, 1670. So he'd been in. So this John Coventry guy, he had been in Parliament for 3 years and was serving in Parliament at the same time as William Penn was in court at the Old Bailey. So this guy, this John Coventry, is contemporary with William Penn. Coventry was son of another guy called John Coventry, his dad, second son of the Lord Keeper Thomas Coventry, Croom Park, Worcestershire, between 1655. He travelled on the continent with his tutor, the poet Edward Sherborne. He matriculated at the Queen's College, Oxford, so he went to Oxford. He was made a Knight of the Bath, the coronation of Charles II the following year. They used to vote for these knights. We don't vote for them anymore. They get nominated, but we used to vote. In 1667, he went with his uncle to negotiations. He was elected for Weymouth. So he's from... He was a fairly active member. So this is what happened to him. All right, on the 21st of December, 1670. Oh, it wasn't 1670. December's right at the end of the year, though, isn't it? Wow, that's going to be like... I think that's when that's the same year William Penn, I think, was in the Old Bailey. So this could have been a few months after it, owing to a jest made by Coventry in the House of Commons on the subject of the king's amours. So this guy, he does some kind of joke in the Commons about the king. And then another knight, Sir Thomas Sandys, an officer of the guard, with other accomplices, by the order of Monmouth and apparently with the approval of the king, waylaid him as he was returning home to Suffolk Street and slit his nose to the bone. Can you believe that? So he did a joke in Parliament about the king, and then one of the king's guards and another knight, apparently to do with the king's consent, went after him. Owing to a jest made by Coventry in the House of Commons, the outrage created an extraordinary sensation in the Commons, and in consequence, Parliament debated a bill to prevent malicious maiming and wounding. A measure known as the Coventry Act was passed, declaring assaults accompanied by personal mutilation a felony without benefit of clergy. The act wasn't repealed until 1828. So that's where he's got his own kind of little statute law. Look, no pardon for those who cut off the nose of Sir John Coventry, a member, but by Act of Parliament. So an actual person, a member of Parliament himself, had a bit of a law put in there around him, which is kind of ridiculous. And his name's John. So I don't know why, but it's got me thinking about John Lennon for some reason. Like it all revolves around the joke in Parliament or Commons. It kind of makes me wonder if the whole Beatles thing was some kind of pun. I don't know. They say they were manufactured pop music. I don't know. This shall not extend to the Prime Minister as a committee. So that's pretty crazy. And then John Lennon actually ended up getting shot, didn't he? But that's the thing. So I think the point to that story is this. The point to that is this, that someone made a joke at the Royals and they sent someone after them to get them. And even though he was a knight, it was other guards and knights who did it. So that makes me wonder if, when we have these misfortunes, when Elizabeth was alive, when, if people were doing things that, they weren't happy with, they ended up, ending up in misfortune or whatever by whatever arrangements. That's what it's making me think with the speed cameras, and like the Alex Ferguson or whoever it was on the motorway when he needed to go for a wee and then they'd put him in a traffic jam or something. There's stuff like that. Then people might say, yeah, I know, but there's loads of jokes like Spitting Image. But the thing with Spitting Image is consented to. I mean, it's like, good charity work. There's some things that, if they were too serious, like Putin, Putin has made it illegal to make jokes out of him, so it makes them look very too obviously authoritarianism or too obviously fascist, Whereas, if you make it look like, or you make it look like it's okay to do jokes or whatever, but there might be some things like, which are more, I don't know, Spitting Images or slapstick, it's, there might be other things, like, someone trying to buy out the King's BlackRock Vanguard shares or take over McVitie's or Roundtree's or Cadbury's or shut down the sugar factory by royal appointment when, nobody should, put a stop to all this junk food, get rid of the speed cameras, get rid of corruption, things like that, who are these strange incidents with the King's Guard, with the cops, stuff like that, try and solve the problems. This is the thing. They might not want the problem solving because, the problems might be their way of sorting out problems, well, problems to them, This is the thing.